Well, hey, welcome to Ridge Talk, everybody. It's just Daniel and I today discussing brokenness in our community and ways that we can address it. And we are going to narrow in on a specific need in our community. But before we do that, I just wanted to toss it over to Daniel and have him kind of recap where we were in the message and kind of set us up for today.
Yeah, great. That's wide open. So yeah. I'm really excited about that. It's almost a recap of what, Sunday was all about. One of the things I wish I was clearer about at the beginning of, I'll tell you this. One of our friends we had kids in the room on Sunday, and they wanted to ask their kids just to kind of see what did they get from the message, and they said, "Hey, do you know what the sermon was about today?" And their oldest kid said, "Yeah, it was about trees." so I did. I had two different trees that were kind of in the service guide and part of the notes, and one of those was about the withering tree and the flourishing tree, and I really wish I was clearer about what those really represent. Earlier in the message, I talked about the fact that we are simultaneously, as Christians, we are citizens of really two kingdoms, and we live in this tension between two kingdoms. One is the kingdom of heaven that we are currently a part of, right? It's that already not yet. We're already citizens, and yet we still have to navigate lives as almost sojourners in exile here. I mean, we are still in this fallen world and have to navigate fallen systems. And so really those two trees are the two kingdoms. It's a kingdom of heaven that is rooted firmly in Christ Jesus and under his command, and working through the proper structures that produces fruit in keeping with righteousness and the Holy Spirit. And then the withering tree is the rotten. It produces rotten fruit because it's rooted in sin.
Yeah, it's the kingdom of the earth.
It's the kingdom of the earth, right? The kingdom of man, however you want to kind of look at that. And so that really was the main idea. The idea that we were trying to get at on Sunday is, okay, it's really important for us as we're living as citizens of heaven, but also as sojourners in this world, that God has called us to be a faithful presence. And to be a faithful presence, that requires us to be able to look at the brokenness around us, to acknowledge it, not turn our eyes away, and also not to respond out of some sort of sense of guilt or anything like that, but that we're actually, when the gospel changes our hearts, it motivates us and pushes us outward into action. And so, I identified three different fruits that I see in our context that are there. I think in West Virginia and in Marion County that we experience at a heightened level. Again, there's 1,000 things I could have put there.
Sure.
But the three things I looked at were poverty and poverty, addiction, and then fractured families.
Yep.
Just we see brokenness in families, and that all of those things take a number of different pathologies, but
sure,
they're all there. So.
Yeah, so that's a good foundation for where we were in our message, and specifically then honing in on fractured families, which, as we've discussed kind of before we came in here, that fractured families are a major contributor to the other issues that we see.
There's so much overlap with all of them, right? Addiction produces fractured families, which then produces more addiction and poverty. It's all connected.
Yeah, human beings tend to go in these cycles, and we need something to break us out of those cycles. And what we're acknowledging is, as believers, that the invitation is to partner with Jesus in establishing the kingdom of heaven here on this earth, and that is what disrupts the cycles in our lives that keep us in bondage to things.
That's exactly right. If Jesus had never entered into our mess, we would still be in the same sin cycle indefinitely, right? Like it absolutely takes someone who inserts themselves into that situation in order to break the cycle.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a good segue into the question that we received this week and where we're going to spend our time talking this morning. In your message, you mentioned that West Virginia has the highest number of children in the foster care system per capita in the United States. I think it's something like 3 times the national average.
It is 3 times the national average.
It is a staggering statistic, one that we can't ignore, that this is a major issue surrounding us, and it's a kingdom issue. It's one that we should care about. And so the question in light of that statement was this: in what ways is Southridge Church stepping into the brokenness, and what organizations or agencies or programs can we support alongside you?
It's a really good question. One of the things. By the way, I was going so fast on Sunday and had 1,000 things to say, and I don't feel like I
trying
said.
to stay under that 35-minute
I was
mark.
trying real hard, and I don't know that I really was able to say all the things I wanted to say. One of the things that I said, and this is true, is that we're really at the very beginning of that journey. Like, we're currently in the process as a church of discovering what a holistic and a sustainable ministry actually looks like.
Yep.
So I think it would be unwise of us to just jump in and try to reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
I think that would not be healthy, and really to jump in without knowing what we're getting ourselves into. And so we're just in this process of discovery where we're having conversations with some different ministries. I think I mentioned a few of them on Sunday. I know we're going to mention some more here in a little bit. We'll also drop them in our show notes. But we're really, like I said, we're really in the discovery phases of, well, what does it look like for us as a church to really get behind this, and then also to empower our people to do it. Because it's a huge task.
It is.
It's daunting, and there's an emotional component to it that or a fear component that might keep people away. And so we really want to navigate that well, and not in a way that it produces guilt or fear, but in a way that inspires and produces it's a gospel-centered focus of, well, Jesus has changed our hearts, and this was his posture towards us, and so we want to have that same posture towards our community.
Yeah. For sure. We want it to be a natural outflow of who we are as Christ followers, and not just a program that we would run, or not just something that you use the term reinventing the wheel, which I think is really what we're trying to, how we're trying to approach this, is with the wisdom to say what organizations are around us that are doing things that we might be able to empower people toward, rather than just trying to invent something from the ground up within our church, and really just trying to get our heads around the best way that we can plug into that.
Yeah, Sean, I'd honestly would like to toss the question back to you, because I know that you have been really more at the forefront of this conversation, and you've gone a little bit farther in exploring what this kind of looks like. I would love to hear you talk about your journey with relation to fostering.
Sure. So last year, I attended something called the Foster West Virginia Summit at Chestnut Ridge Church, and it was... it was an eye-opening day. It was like drinking from a fire hose.
Sure.
I left there kind of like just processing so much. But what started to become clear pretty quickly was the level of need around us here in West Virginia, and the fact that as Christ followers, that our call really is to minister to things like this. And so as a result of a lot of different things in life, my wife and I are actually in the licensure process to become foster parents right now.
That's incredible.
We're on week 9 of classes. We have signed up with a foster agency. We've got all kinds of paperwork that we've been filling out, and we're in the process of getting through some of these classes and some other requirements in order to be able to welcome some kids into our home, hopefully later this year. And as we're going through this process, again, like it started with this information that I got a year ago, a lot of conversation, a lot of prayer between my wife and me, and now we're getting further and further into this world. We're seeing just the opportunity here for people to minister in such a profound way.
How have you seen this? I know you've got a lot you could say.
Sure.
How have you seen God change your heart and transform the way you think since you've stepped into this process?
Sure, that's a great question. For us, as we've gotten into this and learned more about it and seen really what the needs are and kind of how the system works and what fostering really is and the heart behind it, it has gone from just looking at it as a potential way for us to bring a child into our family, and it's really turned into us feeling like this is an opportunity and a calling into a specific type of ministry to these kids and to their families, because foster care is about restoring families. It's about stepping in a difficult time in a family's life, these parents and these children, and ministering to them, providing a safe place for these children while their families are trying to get help with different issues that have caused the separation in the first place. And it's an opportunity for us as Christ followers to minister to these children, but also to help them seek reconciliation and restoration inside their families.
Now, that's a potentially controversial thing that you just said, and not that it's wrong. I agree with everything you just said. I just wonder. I wonder how much of people who are going into this, who, for one, I think there's a lot of people who are maybe too fearful to really even take that first step.
Yeah.
But then the people who do go into it, I wonder if there is some level of, well, I'm going to come in and save the day. I'm going to go in and be a savior to these kids and get them away from their terrible situation that they're in. What I just heard you say was, that's not a good heart for foster care. A holistic ministry with regard to fostering is care not just for the kids, but for their parents.
Yes. So it goes back to what you brought up, the idea of fractured families.
Yeah.
We realize that the foster care system exists because of the brokenness in the world. Brokenness in parents who most of the time have come from broken situations themselves. There's a high percentage of foster families who find themselves, having their children taken from their homes who were a part of that system. It's a repeating generational cycle. And so we have to understand that these are all broken human beings, just as all of us are. And it's not about trying to alienate one group from the other. Obviously, you want to and need to protect children and have them in a safe environment, and there are reasons why they're in that situation in the first place. But our last class actually dealt with how can we as foster parents help children maintain connections to their family, and because for them it's their whole world, it's all they know. And for a lot of them, even coming out of a situation that's difficult, leading to them being taken out of their home, those are still their parents whom they love. Those are still the family members that they know and love. And it's really given us a perspective that I believe is the right perspective in a lot of ways, is to say that this is about restoring families, while also doing what's best for these children in the meantime, as parents are trying to get help with issues and trying to get back to a place where they can experience that restoration. I'd like to actually read something that an acquaintance of mine had posted. They had taken a foster child into their home for the second time. They had foster children with them once before who were reunified with family. And then they brought another child into their home. And this is what they had to say. And this really framed the heart of fostering for me really well. Here's what it said. It said, whether it be a month, 3 months, or longer, we thank God for the privilege of serving them and their family in this difficult season of their lives.
Wow.
And that is really the heart for foster ministry, to say, here's a family who is experiencing tremendous brokenness, disruption, pain, and here's a way that we can step in and minister to them in this difficult season of their lives. And of course, the children are a priority as far as their safety and all of that goes, but having that perspective of not trying to really make one side out to be the bad guy in a situation or anything like that, and understanding that this is an opportunity to show holistic, restorative love to these kids and to these families, I think is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And, as Christians, Paul talks about how we've been given the ministry of reconciliation, right? God reconciled us back to, the Father, through his death on the cross and his resurrection. And so he's reconciled us, and he's given us the ministry of reconciling others back to God. And so that should be the heartbeat of Christians, right? That we are excited about, reconciliation, restoration. I know it's more complex than that. I know it is. I know that
complex is the right word for this. It is. And look, I don't sit here as any sort of expert. We're early in this process. We've not had a child in our home yet. I'm not trying to present myself as some expert of it, but we are in this process. The deeper that we get into it, the more you realize the complexities of it.
Of course.
Because it's dealing with people, and people are complex, and situations are unique, and people matter, right? Like that's the whole part of all of this, is that every individual in these circumstances matters. And so it really is looking to try to figure out how can the people of God, how can the church step in and minister to children and to families. And, like you said, as we're trying to figure out what does that look like as a congregation, there are ways that people can step into things now. One of the things that became immediately apparent to me in this is that one of the things that they tell us right off the bat is, I think the statistic is half of foster parents don't make it longer than 2 years until they're done. So the need for support systems is huge. And so as we examine this issue, this question, how can we step into this brokenness? One of the primary ways is, if you know somebody who's fostering, step up and be their support system. Not everybody is going to be able to say yes to being a foster parent, but you can say yes to supporting a family who's making that decision. That might be taking some meals to them a couple times a week. It might be picking up their laundry and doing it for them, or helping to provide transportation. One of the other things that we've learned about are some other opportunities available. There's respite care, which is really what it's the official term for babysitting. So you can become like an approved family who would watch foster kids, like if the foster parents need to travel out of state and can't take the kids on that particular trip, or just need time to connect with each other, or whatever it might be. You can step up as a respite care person through a foster agency. Here are a couple other things that, as we've gotten deeper into this, that we've become aware of. Number one is the need for teenagers. So the staggering and disheartening and saddening thing is that the foster care system goes up to age 18, and then once kids are legally adults, they're out of that system. And there are some structures in place to try to help them, but the statistics on what happens with children who've aged out of the system aren't that great. There's a high percentage of incarceration, addiction, repetition of these cycles. Like I said, so many of the kids who are in the system come from parents who were in the system, and then that percentage jumps higher for those who aged out of the system.
Sure.
All of that. So here, I think like we've talked a lot about ideas at this point, right? And like we've said, we're trying to get our minds around how best to step in to this as a church. But can I give just some practical examples of, like, if you're watching this, listening to this, and you're like, how can I help today? Like, here are just a couple ways that you can begin to do that and that you don't really need to come through us for, as we're developing how we're going to step into this. There are foster agencies. We work with Children's Home Society of West Virginia. They have a Morgantown office. There's also NECCO. It's NECCO. Those are two agencies locally that I'm aware of that I know people who are parents through those agencies. Here's something that we became aware of just last week in this process. So our agency, Children's Home Society of West Virginia, has a residential facility for children who have aged out of the system. So they've turned 18, they haven't been adopted, and they are trying to figure out how to start life as an adult. And so many of them have nothing. Some of them are coming like not even from a foster placement. They've been in a residential facility because people are not bringing teens into their homes. There's such a huge need for foster parents to take teens. It's not happening. So then you have these teens that are in these residential facilities. They age out of the system, and then our agency tries to assist them. And a couple of the ways that they do that is, number one, they take donations of household items, because these guys are starting with nothing. They're trying to, move into their first apartment, and they need things like pots and pans and silverware and furniture and a bed and all of the things that you can think of for a home. So maybe the next time someone has a question about where they can donate to, Children's Home Society of West Virginia in Morgantown will gladly accept donations of household items and clothing and different things for those kids, as well as younger kids who are in the foster system. That's one way that you can get involved right now. You can get a hold of them. I'm sure NECCO probably has similar things in place. There's an organization in Morgantown as well called Chestnut Mountain Ranch that houses young men and does a lot of different things to assist them. They have the Ranch Community Store in Morgantown. They have the Ranch Quick Lube, where they employ some of these guys to do basic maintenance on vehicles and things like that. So next time you need your oil changed, run up there and do it. Or if you have some things that you'd like to donate to their store that they can use to help fund what they're doing, that's another.
And they're connected to Chestnut Mountain Village, right?
I believe so. They're all the chestnuts start to get a little confusing in my mind, because Chestnut Ridge Church that we were planted out of is heavily involved in a lot of this stuff. They have their own program there called Foster West Virginia, which is another thing that you can look into. They are supporting foster families, most specifically through their Foster West Virginia program. And then one thing that I feel like sometimes gets overlooked is the social workers who work for Child Protective Services.
Yeah, sure. Wow.
So there's a huge need for CPS workers. And when you look at their workload and all of like the burnout rate, the attrition rate is pretty high. They're also dealing with like going into the homes when these children are needing to be taken. They're the ones that oftentimes are providing transportation of foster kids to like visits with their parents while they're in foster care. They need our support. They need our prayers. They need to know that they matter. Like the work that they are doing is so vital. And it's also important to understand that like, the court system, the people that work inside the system with CPS proceedings, those caseworkers, there are people that are, there's an organization called CASA, which is a court-appointed advocate, for that goes in when there are these proceedings and helps give some background for these kids and kind of helps to try to help the court understand what's in the best interest of the child in that situation. They advocate for the child specifically. And what I'm really learning in all of this is that it's really meant to be a cooperative effort. It's not a foster parents versus biological parents. It's not it's not meant to be this like oppositional thing. It's meant to be this collaborative effort through these different organizations who are trying to do their best for these kids. And I'm sure there are a lot of opinions about that, a lot of things that I've not been through it. I can't speak to it. It's another like talk about complexity, right? But support social workers. Even if that just means like, of somebody who is working in these organizations, like take them out for dinner, buy them a cup of coffee, encourage them, like call them up and pray for them. Like there are so many avenues to be able to help right here, right now, that it really just becomes about identifying where's a target. I can call somebody up at this organization and find out how I can help, or I can call, Chestnut Mountain Ranch and see how I can help there, whatever the case might be.
Sean, that's a lot of really, really helpful resources and thoughts about how we can even begin to serve in this way and to kind of help address some of these symptomatic issues that we're seeing in our area. The question was, what are we as a church doing? And the answer is, we're still learning.
Yeah.
We're still learning. We're still exploring. We're still researching. And that is a task that's too big for just one or two people. And so if you're watching this and you're part of what we're doing here at Southridge, I would encourage you to do your own research, do your own learning, join with us in exploring. The reality is we don't want to start another program. We want to start, like I said, a sustainable, holistic ministry. And right now, we don't even have the manpower and the bandwidth to even do something like that. And so we're exploring what that looks like, but we're at the very beginning part of that. But we want to invite people into that journey with us. It's not, something that just a few of us have to take on. This is what we as a church desire to do in order to be a faithful presence in our community. So
yeah, and I'll just say, I know I felt like I rambled a little bit because I have all this information packed into my head.
No, it was good, man.
And I'm passionate about it, but I hope that it was helpful. I'd be more than happy to sit down with somebody and help them kind of understand like how they could get plugged in. There are other foster families who have children in their homes in our church now that may welcome support, I'm sure. So just ask questions. Don't be afraid to say yes to some things. And like I said, the opportunity is to just, if you can't say yes to being a foster parent right now, consider saying yes to supporting foster parents.
Absolutely. You can always do something, right? Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate it. Man, thanks for talking with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, you can check below. We're going to try to include in the show notes a few of the names of the organizations. If you're curious of how you can help, you can get in contact with them, and you can always shoot me an email. It's Sean, that's spelled SEAN, at southridgechurch.net. I'd be happy to help get you connected or to answer any other questions you may have. So thanks for joining us today.